Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. At the daily COVID update in Ottawa today, federal officials said, with the exception of a few tricky spots, the country is making progress. Daily COVID case counts are down nationally, but cases of more severe and critical illnesses continue to rise, and the majority of reported cases are of the new variants of concern. With vaccine deliveries now ramping up across the country, Canada will be receiving 2 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine per week. That will increase to 2.4 million weekly dose deliveries in June. However, officials say there is still the question of vaccine effectiveness towards the new COVID variants of concern.
So far, the B117, the predominant variant in Canada, seemed to be covered well from the vaccines, even if it has a little bit of reduction in coverage. The other variants still need more data, but there are some concerns, at least in the lab, that the current vaccines may not cover them as well. But still, the vaccines will provide protection, and I think they seem to be very effective at protecting against severe outcomes.
Nunavut's COVID case count continues to climb. There are 67 cases in the territory, 61 of them are in Iqaluit, and now cases are beginning to pop up in some very concerning places. Today, the Regional Medical Boarding Home and the Territorial Jail both announced positive cases. Today also marked the first person to be medevaced for COVID treatment from Iqaluit. Nunavut's Premier is getting frustrated with Iqaluit citizens and urged them to follow the public health guidelines.
We know that mask wearing will stop the spread and stop someone from the likelihood of getting COVID-19. And it's one of the things that we can do that doesn't really harm anyone. It hurts not to visit. It hurts not to socialize. But to wear a mask, that's one of the easiest things we can do.
A First Nations woman in Winnipeg is encouraging others to take the COVID-19 pandemic more seriously after being hospitalized due to the virus. The woman recently gave birth and hasn't been able to see her newborn son. As COVID-19 case numbers continue to remain high in Manitoba, First Nations people are still making up disproportionate rates of cases and deaths. Here's Brittany Hobson with more.
It's been 16 days since Shanine Robinson Desjarlais gave birth to her third son. The past few weeks were supposed to be a joyous time for the mother. It's been anything but. Robinson Desjarlais is in hospital after contracting COVID-19.
I have a lung infection and COVID-related pneumonia.
This is her second time since giving birth she has been hospitalized. Doctors tell her she has low oxygen levels, meaning her blood and lungs are not getting enough to function normally.
Feels like there's an elephant sitting on my chest. It's unbearable. It's scary. Like you feel like you're drowning in your own lungs. It's just this unexplainable, scary feeling. It's so terrible.
The 41-year-old hasn't been able to see her newborn for the past 3 days. Doctors say she's too weak to care for him.
As a mother, I feel really helpless. That's my job. My job right now should be to be able to take care of my family and breastfeed my little baby and just be enjoying my time at home. And that's what I was praying for and hoping for. And it's really hard because I feel really helpless being here.
Her husband and 3 sons are isolating at home after her 2 youngest also tested positive.
I struggle for him mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually too. But, we're just doing a lot of prayers and a lot of people are reaching out and helping.
First Nations people make up approximately 40% of the COVID-19 hospitalizations in the province. For much of the pandemic, First Nations people have been disproportionately impacted and at much younger rates. This week there have been 6 deaths, including a male and female in their 20s. COVID-19 variants are also on the rise, with the province saying today they are now treating all infections like they are variants of concern. Dr. Marcia Anderson with the First Nations Pandemic Response Team says the most important thing now is to get vaccinated as soon as possible.
Most of the cases being diagnosed in Winnipeg now are due to VOCs. They are causing more severe outcomes. We're seeing more cases at younger ages. Really want to emphasize how important the vaccine is.
For Robinson Desjarlais, she is stressing the importance of taking this virus seriously.
I get it. We're all frustrated, but if we ever want to be together again, we're all going to have to just deal with the reality of it.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We want to hear what you think about COVID-19 cases in Canada and their impacts. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and now TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A missing woman from Samson Cree Nation in Alberta has been identified more than 40 years after she disappeared with the help of DNA. APTN's Chris Stewart has more on that story.
The last time Shirley Soucy had contact with her family was 1979. Shirley Soucy was a young woman. She had moved from Edmonton and then to Vancouver. She had always stayed in contact with her family.
My grandmother used to receive, her mom used to receive birthday cards and Christmas cards. And they stopped. They just totally stopped. And my grandmother knew something had happened.
Fearing for her safety, her family began searching for Shirley.
My grandmother told my Auntie Belle and I to look for my Aunt Shirley. So we did. So over the course of 29 years, both my Auntie Belle and I would travel to Vancouver. We would go to the hospitals, the graveyards, any place and anywhere that we could think.
Shirley Soucy was no longer in Vancouver. She was living in Kern County, California. In July of 1980, her body was found. She was stabbed to death. And with no way to identify her, she was known as Jane Doe No. 5, Kern County. And she remained Jane Doe for nearly 40 years. Her killer, Wilson Touzette, was convicted of her murder in 2012. He is also convicted of killing another Jane Doe about the same time as he killed Soucy. A non-profit DNA matching group called the DNA Doe Project, who tried to find the identities of Jane Does, identified that this Jane Doe had relatives in Alberta. The project has helped identify more than 45 Jane Does since starting in 2017.
In looking at all of her DNA matches holistically, we knew that our Jane Doe probably had parents who came from the same area in Alberta. And in February of 2020, we put out a public plea on Facebook, and we asked anyone that lived in that area if they might remember her, might recognize her. 10 days later, we were contacted by her niece, Violet, who said, "I believe this is my aunt."
The DNA matched, and Violet Soucy had found her aunt after half a lifetime of looking. She says there were a flood of emotions.
It was freeing because now I lived up to my grandmother's expectations, and now we can put Shirley to rest in our proper ceremonial ways and ensure that her spirit is not stuck in this place.
Violet is hoping to bring her aunt's remains back home for a proper traditional ceremony after the COVID threat is over. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
In British Columbia, a collaborative effort with federal and provincial governments and industry will see the Highway of Tears get full cell phone coverage. APTN's Lee Wilson has more.
Highway 16 is notorious in Canada due to the high numbers of people that have gone missing on that road since the 1970s. The majority have been Indigenous women and girls, with many of the cases remaining unsolved to this day, earning the nickname Highway of Tears. The highway has very limited cell phone coverage, but now an announcement: it will have 100% mobile coverage by 2022. Mary T.G., Executive Director of Carriers Canny Family Services in Prince George, says advocates and families have been pushing for this since 2006 with the Highway of Tears Symposium report.
The dream of actually having cell coverage all the way through inconceivable at the time. And so, after all these years, 2006 is when the recommendations report came about, and now we're in 2021, and it took that long to get cell coverage. I'm happy, but it should have happened sooner, definitely.
She credits the advocates and families keeping the pressure on through the years. Her journey through advocating came after her cousin, Ramona Wilson, was found murdered near Smithers Airport in 1995.
To watch my auntie, as brokenhearted as she was, still be so strong, and that was her rationale. Like, I'm doing the Ramona Wilson walk every year so that this never happens to another mother.
The Highway of Tears will see 12 cell phone towers built between Prince Rupert and Morristown, also known as Whitsett. It is a partnership with the Canadian and BC governments and Rogers through the Universal Broadband Fund that will contribute nearly $12 million for the project. According to Women and Gender Equality and Rural Economic Development, this will address one of the 33 recommendations of the Highway of Tears Symposium. This improvement in cellular service will enable travelers to let loved ones know that they are safe and look up directions if they are lost, or call for help in an emergency. TG is pleased that the federal government is taking part in the project for self-service on Highway 16, but says there's more work to be done.
It's really a lot of work that we still need to do. Of course, within the Highway of 16 recommendations report, there's a lot of work that needs to happen with the RCMP and the relationship with RCMP.
TG believes the long history of oppression of Indigenous people and not being heard forces people to fight harder.
And so in order for us to get to the table, if you will, we need to be strong, we need to speak up, and we need to just demand our rightful place in ensuring that the healing of our nations happens, and it's not just something that's going to be given.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Prince George.
And now we just wanted to send a quick shout out to Butterflies in Spirit. They are a dance group that's comprised of family members of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. It started as a dream 9 years ago. Now they've traveled all over the world raising awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Great work and congratulations. We have to take a short break, but still to come. The TMX pipeline has been put on hold, and it's because of some very small birds. Welcome back. Opponents of the multi-billion-dollar Trans Mountain Pipeline got some help from Mother Nature and a tiny bird, which has temporarily stopped the mega project. APTN's Tina House has the story.
Kaya George from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation grew up along this inlet, looking at the industrial development just across the water, including Kinder Morgan's Westridge dock, where 1 million barrels of bitumen oil will be loaded onto super tankers daily once the Trans Mountain Pipeline project is complete. George, along with others from her nation, have opposed the Trans Mountain Pipeline since the beginning, with the belief that a spill in these waters is inevitable.
I was taught that this inlet is our grandmother. It's our oldest grandmother, and we must do anything we can and everything we can to protect it.
But now they have help from the hummingbirds in stopping part of the massive project. Sarah Ross and Donna Clark are part of the Nest Finders network and saw the construction crews were clearing an area where hummingbirds were nesting. So they brought in 2 wildlife officers to see what was happening.
I knew where she was nesting, and as we got close, we could hear the chainsaws, and we saw the tree fall, and all of us saw it. And that was when the wildlife officer said, "Stop the work," and they did. The guy got on his walkie-talkie, stopped the work. The cutter came out. We walked right in there, and I was able to locate the broken branch on the ground, with the nest still attached, and it was destroyed.
The company has been ordered to stop work in the area until after the hummingbird nesting season is over in late August. In a statement, the company said, "The order applies to the specific work package. which is an area covering approximately 1,000 meters of private land between the Trans-Canada Highway and a rail corridor, and restricts certain construction activities. Trans Mountain will proceed with any work within the 1,000-meter area not subject to restrictions of the order. Donna Clark is happy they were able to utilize a federal government law to give a temporary reprieve from the project.
A federal law, the Migratory Bird Convention Act, which it makes it against the law to destroy or disturb nests, including eggs, during nesting season. And of course, it's spring, it's nesting season.
Eugene Kung has represented numerous Indigenous nations in fighting the project in the courts.
Any delays are going to cause some form of increase in cost. And of course, with every cost increase, the project falls further outside of the public interest.
Hummingbirds represent good luck, and they represent what is to come. And I think in this situation, it's very clear of what is to come, and that's ultimately the defeat of the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Tina House, APTN National News, North Vancouver.
On Tuesday, April 27th, APTN News aired a story regarding an agreement signed between two Innu communities and mining company IOC. That story was a simplified version of one that aired on our French news program, and in the process of translating it into English, some errors were made that need to be corrected. Here are the corrections we would like to make. The agreement with IOC is signed. It is not in principle as stated in the story. The lawsuit discussed in the story was initiated in 2013, not 2014. APTN did not obtain a copy of this agreement from Rio Tinto, but rather from an unnamed source. We would like to add that the agreement has more than just monetary benefits for the communities. It also involves an apology for past actions by the mining company. Finally, we regret saying that the band councils ignored our interview requests. Rather, they declined to speak to APTN, would have been more appropriate. APTN apologizes for these errors. It's time for one more break, but still to come, a Winnipeg woman part of the U.S. class action lawsuit against Peter Nygaard is speaking out. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Now this might be our first photo from a drone. Matt LeMay sent us this beauty of the Kitchissippi River located near La Passe, Ontario. That looks like a great area for some canoeing. Thanks to all our viewers that have been sending us their photos. Keep those photos coming by sending them to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured on our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast.
Starting in the east, 11 degrees and rain in Charlottetown and 10 degrees in Halifax. 2 degrees in Nain and 4 degrees in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 10 degrees and a mix of sun and cloud in Montreal and 11 degrees in Quebec City. 14 in clouds in Toronto and 12 degrees in Peterborough. 13 degrees in Wawa and 20 in Thunder Bay. 0 degrees in Thompson and 7 degrees in Norway House. 20 in sun in Winnipeg and 22 in sun in Brandon. 23 in sun in Regina and 18 in sun in Saskatoon. 13 in rain in La Ronge and 12 degrees in Buffalo Narrows. Over in the west, 12 degrees in Fort McMurray and 9 in High Level. 19 in sun in Lethbridge and 14 degrees in Calgary. 15 in rain in Vancouver and 14 in Quesnel. 12 degrees in Fort Nelson and 13 in Smithers. 9 degrees in Dawson and 9 degrees in Watson Lake. -3 in Yellowknife and +4 in Wrigley. 2 degrees in Fort McPherson and 2 degrees in Colville Lake. +1 in Chesterfield and 0 degrees in Whale Cove. -2 in Clyde River and +1 in Arctic Bay.
Nadine Moustus is known in court documents as Jane Doe number 44. She's part of a U.S. class action lawsuit against former fashion mogul Peter Nygard. The Winnipeg woman is now attaching her name to those allegations, coming out with her identity exclusively to APTN Investigates. Producer Holly Moore is here to talk about Homegrown Part 2. Holly, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us about Nadine's story.
So Nadine is known only as Jane Doe number 44 in a U.S. class action that was brought against former fashion mogul Peter Nygard last year. And she's coming out to APTN Investigates for the first time as herself. So she's attached her name and her face to the story. She was a former foster child, was apprehended at 18 months, brought into the child welfare system at 11, and eventually worked as a survival sex worker. And so a lot of her background mirrors what we found in the Murdered and Missing Women's Inquiry. And so it's really important that she's come forward now.
So why did she want to have her identity revealed now?
Well, she actually spoke to reporter Kathleen Martins back in March, and so when she came to the shoot for Investigates, we were fully intending to conceal her identity. But she said, you know what, I want to attach my name to this. I want to attach my face to this. She felt like it was very important that the community knew that it was her, and she was able to talk very frankly about some of the biographical details, and so it made for a very powerful interview.
So, Holly, what happens now with the Nygard case?
Well, Peter Nygard is currently incarcerated at Headingley Correctional Centre here in Winnipeg, and he will face an extradition hearing that may determine if he gets extradited or not, and that's happening in November later this year. In the meantime, Nadine says if you have a story about Mr. Nygard, she urges you to come forward to the Winnipeg Police, which is where she reported as well.
All right, Holly, thanks so much for this. That's APTN Investigates producer Holly Moore joining us.
Thanks so much, Daryl.
And now to close out the show, we have a very special birthday shout out to one of our feline friends. We want to wish Safi House, our cat correspondent in Vancouver, a very happy 21st birthday. He's an amazing chef, rock star, and son of APTN video journalist Tina House. Congratulations to Safi for making it to 100 in cat years. Safi looks like he's always having a good time. Well, that'll do it for this edition of APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Have a safe and healthy weekend.